I am both an observer and the observed. I shift back and forth from the veteran who has experienced war to the philosopher who studies war and morality theoretically. Now that may be helpful for my research, as I need only to introspect to find the observations, the feelings, the emotions, and the pain that ultimately informs my philosophical inquiry. It is also confusing, however, as I often feel somewhat schizophrenic, jumping back and forth from one personality to the other. Even until just a few days ago, I wasn't sure who was to speak at these hearings, the war veteran or the philosopher. The philosopher, he speaks from the mind, the warrior from where it hurts. After some moments of heated internal debate, we decided you will hear from us both. As evidenced by SLA Marshall's study, a study which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, human beings are not killers by nature. They have to be created. Political and military leaders, including our own, whose aim it is to further their goals through violence, have recognized this reluctance to kill as jeopardizing their ability to wage war effectively. Consequently, following the Second World War, warrior preparation, basic training boot camp was modified to shift its focus from acquainting soldiers with tactics and weaponry to rather sophisticated techniques of value manipulation, moral desensitization, and psychological conditioning aimed at destroying or overriding the recruit's moral aversion to killing. And judging by the percentage of warriors capable of killing during Vietnam, over some 90%, this program enjoyed great success. But at what cost? Moral injuries are an inevitable consequence of a sophisticated manipulation and distortion of the recruits' moral foundations, their moral identities, and the profound moral confusion and distress they experience as the horror, the insanity, and the moral gravity of their actions in combat become apparent. Moral guilt is, simply speaking, the awareness of having transgressed their moral convictions and the anxiety precipitated by a perceived breakdown of their ethical cohesion, their integrity, and an alienation from the moral community. Shame is the loss of self-esteem consequent to a failure to live up to personal and communal expectations. The observations that some human beings become moral casualties because of their experiences in war is not new. Historically, many societies have recognized war's deleterious moral effects and required returning warriors to undergo elaborate atonement and purification rituals, quarantine, penance, that sort of thing. These therapies provided the means and the opportunity to cope with the moral enormity of their actions in war. Tragically, the moral injuries of modern warriors, however, have been virtually ignored, overlooked, or disregarded for the most part by the mainstream therapeutic community, operating as it does within the Nietzschean, Freudian scientific legacy that views ethical concerns as clinically irrelevant. Focusing instead upon stress and trauma, most moral symptoms presented by returning warriors are either not taken seriously or assimilated under the diagnostic umbrella of post-traumatic stress disorder. As may be expected, the prevalence of moral injuries suffered by those who fought in wars that are controversial or in counterinsurgency guerrilla wars such as in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, where, for example, the distinction between combatant and non-combatant is obscure at best, will be significantly greater and the symptoms more severe. However, all wars yield moral casualties. J. Glenn Gray, a philosopher, writes of his experience as an intelligence officer during World War II, I quote, "My conscience seems to become little by little defiled. Only if I can get out of this war and back on the soil where clean earth will wash away these stains. I have also other things on my conscience. A man named H, accused of being a local Gestapo agent in one small town, was an old man of 70. I was quite harsh to him and remember threatening him with an investigation where they put him under house arrest. Day before yesterday, word came that he and his wife had committed suicide by taking poison. The incident affected me strongly and still does. I was directly or indirectly the cause of their deaths. I hope it will not rest too hard on my conscience, but yet, if it does not, I shall be disturbed as well. End of quote. Gray's insights are especially valuable as they illustrate that the actions and experiences of those involved in a good war and not directly confronting the enemy on the battlefield can precipitate moral injury. Consequently, those military apologists who argue that moral injury may be avoided by educating soldiers, probably convincing is best. You saw the major say this very thing in the documentary, about the justness and necessity of war and the appropriateness of their combat behavior. Such people can benefit from Gray's observations, I think. To adequately treat and care for our returning servicemen and women, we must appreciate the relevancy of moral values and norms to defining ourselves as persons, to structuring our world and rendering our relationship to it and to other human beings comprehensible. We must understand that these values and norms provide the parameters of our being, our moral identity. Most importantly, we must recognize the adverse effects of combat behavior upon a warrior's self-esteem, self-image, integrity, thereby precipitating moral injury.